Morning breaks over Washington, D.C., the first rays of sunlight stretch across the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the city's historic heart. The Potomac River shimmers like liquid glass, reflecting the quiet beauty of a nation awakening. The air is still filled only with the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic beginning to stir. As the sun climbs higher, its light touches the marble pillars of the Lincoln Memorial, the towering grace of the Washington Monument, and the majestic dome of the United States Capitol. Each monument stands as a symbol of America's ideals: freedom, democracy, and unity shining proudly in the new morning light. Yet beyond the reflecting pool, rising with its own distinct presence, stands another monument, one that tells a deeper story. Unlike the white stone structures that surround it, this building gleams with a bronze radiance, intricate and alive, shimmering under the sun like woven metal and memory intertwined. This is the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Its three-tiered design rises upward like a crown, bold, modern, and deeply symbolic. Its bronze lattice facade captures the light in ever-changing ways, glowing golden at sunrise and burning amber as dusk approaches. But this is more than a building of steel and glass. It is a structure built from the weight of history, from the triumphs and the tears of generations. Every panel, every line, every space within it carries meaning, a reflection of the people whose stories it holds. It stands as a living conversation with the monuments that surround it. Across the mall, the white obelisk of the Washington Monument rises as a symbol of the nation's founding ideals. The bronze form of the museum faces it not in opposition, but in dialogue. Together, they tell the story of America, its promise and its pain, its progress and its unfinished journey. This museum is not made of marble or stone, but of memory, identity, and spirit. It embodies centuries of struggle and strength, and celebrates the beauty and creativity that emerged from them. It is a place that tells the story of America through the lens of those who built it, shaped it, and transformed it from the chains of slavery to the rhythm of jazz, from the fields of labor to the stages of art and activism. Here, history is alive. It breathes through the walls, speaks through the artifacts, and echoes through every visitor who walks inside. The National Museum of African American History and Culture is not just a museum of the past, it is a museum of resilience, of hope, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. It reminds us that the story of African Americans is not separate from the American story, it is the very soul of it. As the morning sun continues to rise, its light wraps the museum in a warm, golden glow, and in that glow, the city awakens not just to a new day, but to the reminder that every dawn carries the light of memory and the promise of a better tomorrow. Long before the bronze walls of the museum ever caught the light of the Washington sun, there was a dream, a vision carried through generations, a dream that one day, the full story of African Americans would stand in the heart of the nation's capital, where all could see it, learn from it, and feel its truth. That dream began more than a century ago. In 1915, a group of African American veterans of the Civil War gathered to propose a national memorial honoring black soldiers and their contributions to the United States. They had fought for freedom on the battlefield, yet still faced segregation and discrimination in the country they had helped to preserve. Their idea was simple, but profound, a monument to courage, sacrifice, and achievement. But the time was not ready. Their proposal was ignored, forgotten, and buried under the weight of indifference and racial prejudice. Decades passed. Throughout the 20th century, the idea resurfaced again and again, whispered in meetings, discussed in committees, brought to Congress by men and women who refused to let it die. Each time, it faced resistance. Some said there was no need. Others said the nation wasn't prepared to confront its past. Yet still, the dream endured. It survived through the voices of those who refused to give up: scholars, artists, veterans, and ordinary citizens who knew that history could not be complete while their story remained untold. In the 1980s and 1990s, momentum grew once more. Leaders like Representative John Lewis championed the cause in Congress, year after year, introducing bills that were repeatedly turned away. But Lewis, a veteran of the civil rights movement and a man who had marched with Martin Luther King Jr., knew something about persistence. He once said, "This museum will be built. It may take time, but it will be built." And finally, after decades of determination, the tide began to turn. In 2003, the United States Congress passed legislation to create the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the newest addition to the Smithsonian Institution. It was not simply an act of construction, it was an act of recognition, a promise to face the truth of the nation's history, not to divide, but to understand, not to dwell in pain, but to honor endurance, creativity, and progress. From that moment, the journey began in earnest. Architects, historians, and visionaries came together to design not just a museum, but a sacred space, a place where the echoes of the past could meet the hopes of the future. Every beam, every gallery, every idea that would later rise on the National Mall began with that simple but powerful truth, that the story of African Americans is inseparable from the story of America itself. The dream had waited more than 100 years. Now, it was finally beginning to take shape, rising, at last, from vision into reality. When the dream of the museum finally became real, the question was no longer if it would be built, but how it should be built. What form could possibly hold the weight of centuries? What kind of building could speak for millions of lives, each one woven into the fabric of America's story? To answer that question, the Smithsonian sought visionaries, architects, and designers who understood that this would be more than a museum. It would be a monument to a people's journey, a symbol of pain and triumph, darkness and light. The man chosen to lead this vision was Sir David Ajay, a Ghanaian-British architect known for blending culture, symbolism, and modern design into his creations. For Ajay, this was not just another project. It was a calling. He and his team imagined a structure that would stand proudly on the National Mall, in conversation with the great white monuments that surrounded it, the Lincoln Memorial, the Capitol, and the Washington Monument. But unlike them, this building would rise in bronze and black colors that reflected both strength and depth, a visual contrast that demanded attention, respect, and reflection. The design they conceived was breathtaking. The museum rises in 3 inverted tiers, a crown reaching upward toward the sky. Its shape was inspired by a Yoruba caryatid, a traditional West African sculpture depicting a woman holding a crown. This was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate homage to African heritage and the strength of the women who have carried generations through adversity and hope. Exterior of the museum is wrapped in a stunning, bronze-colored metal lattice, a screen that filters sunlight through intricate geometric patterns. This lattice was inspired by the ironwork crafted by enslaved African Americans in the South, black artisans, whose artistry once adorned balconies, gates, and railings. Even though their names were lost to history, now, their legacy lives on in every shimmering panel of the museum's facade. By day, the bronze glows with light, alive, dynamic, changing with every passing hour. By night, it burns softly with a golden fire, transforming the building into a lantern on the mall, a beacon of remembrance and pride. The architecture speaks its own language, one of contrast and unity. The museum stands low at its base, rooted in the earth, and rises boldly toward the sky. It mirrors the journey of African Americans from the depths of suffering to the heights of achievement. Its location is also deeply symbolic. The museum sits directly across from the Washington Monument, one of America's most iconic symbols of liberty and power. But the relationship between the two is intentional and poetic. The museum, representing the contributions of African Americans, stands beside the monument to the nation's founding, as if the two are in dialogue. One speaks of ideals, the other reminds us of the struggle to fulfill them. Inside, the design continues this conversation between earth and light, shadow and illumination. Visitors begin below ground, where the story of slavery and struggle unfolds in quiet, powerful spaces. Then, as they move upward through the museum, the light grows, each floor brighter than the one before, reflecting the ascent from bondage to freedom, from despair to hope. Every architectural choice tells part of that story. Every detail holds meaning, from the soft curves of the walls to the open spaces that invite reflection and connection. When the museum opened its doors in 2016, people from across the nation came not just to see a building, but to experience a symbol, a space that finally gave shape and voice to a story that had always been present but too often left unspoken. The National Museum of African American History and Culture stands today as a masterpiece of design, art, and purpose. It is both a work of architecture and a work of poetry, crafted in bronze and light. Speaking across generations, it is a building that does not just stand on the National Mall. It belongs there, completing the story of America's monuments, and giving the nation's memory a deeper, more human form. The journey through the museum does not begin at the top. It begins below the surface, deep underground, where the story of a people and a nation takes root. Visitors descend slowly, leaving behind the bright light of the National Mall. The air grows cooler, the lighting softer. Each step downward feels deliberate, symbolic, a passage not only through space, but through time. Here, 3 vast subterranean levels unfold beneath the ground, forming the foundation of the museum. This descent mirrors the descent into history itself, into the beginnings of the African American story, a story that begins not in freedom, but in captivity. The first gallery, called Slavery and Freedom, reveals the origins of the African presence in America. The walls are lined with maps of the transatlantic slave trade, tracing the routes that carried millions of men, women, and children across the ocean, taken from the shores of Africa, bound in chains, stripped of names, languages, and homes. Dim lighting and echoing sounds fill the space. The creak of wooden ships, the rush of waves, the murmurs of voices that seem to drift from the past. It is haunting. It is quiet. It is honest. In glass cases, artifacts tell what words cannot. Iron shackles small enough to fit a child. A rusted chain once used to bind human hands. Fragments of pottery, coins, tools, traces of lives that endured the unendurable. Nearby stands a slave cabin from Edisto Island, South Carolina, transported piece by piece to this very spot. Its wooden walls are worn and fragile, yet heavy with memory. Standing before it, one can almost hear the whispers of those who once lived within, families who sang through pain, who prayed for a day of deliverance. Further along, a single case holds a small, delicate Bible belonging to Harriet Tubman, the woman who risked her life again and again to guide others to freedom through the Underground Railroad. Her faith, her courage, and her defiance echo in the quiet of the room. As visitors move forward, the exhibits unfold chronologically, guiding them through centuries of transformation from bondage to the fight for liberation. The stories of rebellion, resistance, and endurance are everywhere. The uprisings led by the enslaved, the abolitionists who risked their lives to speak the truth, the soldiers who fought for freedom in a divided nation. This part of the museum is not easy. It is meant to be difficult, a mirror held to the face of a country that was built, in part, on the suffering of its own people. And yet, even here, there is strength. Even in the darkest depths, there are sparks of hope, letters, songs, and stories that reveal the human spirit's refusal to be broken. The journey upward from this level is more than physical, it is emotional. You emerge from the shadows of the past, but you carry its weight with you. And as you rise toward the next level, light begins to return. The transition is powerful, almost spiritual, a reminder that from pain comes purpose, and from struggle comes strength. This is how the museum tells its story, not through facts alone, but through feeling. It doesn't simply ask visitors to learn history, it asks them to experience it. Down here, beneath the earth, you begin to understand the foundation on which everything else was built. A foundation made not of stone or steel, but of the endurance, courage, and unbreakable will of a people who refused to let their story be forgotten. And as you ascend once more toward freedom, toward light, you carry with you the memory of where that journey began. From the darkness of the underground galleries, visitors rise slowly toward the light. The transition feels deliberate, a symbolic ascent from bondage to freedom, from despair to resilience. The next chapter of the museum unfolds before you. The road to freedom. It is a story of struggle and resistance, of courage and transformation, a journey that defines the very soul of America. Here, the air feels different. There is space to breathe again, but the echoes of the past still linger. The exhibits guide you through the turbulent years of revolution and conflict, the age when the United States declared liberty, yet denied it to millions. One wall is filled with images and voices, the stories of those who refused to accept slavery as their fate. You see the faces of the enslaved who ran toward the North, who risked their lives for a chance at freedom. You read the words of Frederick Douglass, once enslaved, who became one of the nation's greatest orators and reformers. His voice, captured in text and sound, still carries power. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Nearby stands a powerful artifact, a weathered railroad car from the era of segregation, labeled colored and white. It sits as a reminder that even after slavery's end, freedom remained incomplete, bound by laws, customs, and invisible barriers. But before that chapter comes the war that tore the nation apart, the Civil War, fought not just over politics, but over humanity itself. Inside one gallery, a case displays the pen used by President Abraham Lincoln to sign the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Next to it rests a Union soldier's uniform. Stained by time, its fabric faded yet dignified. These objects mark a turning point, the beginning of America's reckoning with its own ideals. Another case holds a shawl that belonged to Harriet Tubman, a gift from Queen Victoria herself. Delicate, soft, and simple, it is a symbol of the extraordinary life of a woman who liberated others and lived to see the dawn of freedom. The gallery traces the decades that followed, the promise of emancipation and the harsh reality of Reconstruction. Photographs show the newly freed standing proudly for portraits, faces filled with hope, determination, and dignity. But soon, the exhibits turn somber again. The rise of Jim Crow laws, the violent backlash of white supremacy, and the systematic effort to suppress the rights that freedom had promised. Here, visitors are reminded that liberty, once gained, must still be defended, that progress, once achieved, must still be protected. But even in the shadow of injustice, the spirit of a people did not fade. Through faith, community, and unshakable will, African Americans built schools, founded churches, and created networks of resistance. They gave birth to new movements, new voices, and new dreams. From the fields of the South to the streets of northern cities, from the pulpit to the courtroom, a new generation began to rise, determined to claim not only freedom, but equality. Images fill the walls. W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Ida B. Wells, and countless others who fought with words, actions, and courage. Their legacies remind every visitor that the road to freedom is not a single path. It is a long, winding journey, carried by many hands. The exhibits end in the early decades of the 20th century, but the energy of defiance and determination lingers. You feel it in the music that hums softly through the space, spirituals, blues, and gospel, born from both pain and pride. You see it in the art, the faces, the letters, each one a spark that would soon ignite into the fire of the civil rights movement. As you walk toward the next gallery, light filters through the bronze lattice once again, illuminating the space with a warm, amber glow. It feels like dawn after a long night, fragile, but full of promise. The museum's story, like history itself, keeps moving forward. Freedom has been declared, but the struggle for justice is far from over. And as the visitors ascend toward the next level, they carry the weight of that truth with them, that freedom is not a destination, but a constant fight to uphold the dignity of every human being. After the long road through struggle, the path opens into light. As visitors ascend from the lower levels, the air seems to lift, the darkness fades, replaced by open space, rhythm, and color. Here begins a new story, the story of expression, of innovation, and of culture as power. It is a story that reminds us that even in times of hardship, creativity became a form of survival, and art, a language of freedom. The galleries on this floor are alive with sound and motion. Music plays softly, a blend of gospel harmonies, jazz horns, and soul melodies. Every corner vibrates with energy, with the pulse of a culture that reshaped the American experience. You turn a corner and find yourself surrounded by the sounds of jazz. Trumpets, saxophones, and the rhythm of the drums fill the space. Here are the instruments and suits of Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and Ella Fitzgerald, pioneers who turned struggle into sound, and sound into joy. Through their music, they told the world that beauty could rise even from pain. Further along, a bright spotlight falls upon the stage costumes of legends like James Brown, Whitney Houston, and Beyoncé, symbols of confidence, artistry, and transformation. Their presence is electric, a celebration of self-expression that transcends barriers. In another gallery, the world of sports comes alive. A pair of Muhammad Ali's boxing gloves rests within a glass case, worn, creased, and powerful. They speak of defiance and dignity, of a man who refused to be silent in the face of injustice. Nearby, images of Jackie Robinson crossing the color line in baseball mark another kind of victory, not just athletic, but moral. Everywhere you look, the stories converge: art, music, literature, dance, and film, all threads of the same vibrant tapestry. The walls showcase the bold colors of the Harlem Renaissance, a movement that gave rise to artists like Aaron Douglas, Langston Hughes, and Zora Neale Hurston. They captured the dreams and realities of a people discovering new ways to be seen, to be heard, and to define themselves. As you walk, screens flicker with film clips, scenes from Sidney Poitier, Spike Lee, and Viola Davis, actors and directors who challenged stereotypes and reshaped cinema. In every piece of art, every lyric, every story, there is a message. That identity is power, and creativity is liberation. The energy here feels alive, joyful, confident, unstoppable. It's a space that celebrates not just what African Americans have overcome, but what they have created, the music, fashion, language, and spirit that have influenced the world. You see a display of clothing and photographs, tracing the evolution of style from Harlem's sharp suits and vibrant dresses to the street in hip-hop culture that define modern expression. A nearby case holds a microphone once used by Tupac Shakur, and lyrics handwritten by Kendrick Lamar, bridging the past and the present. The message is clear: art is resistance, art is memory, art is truth turned into rhythm, color, and motion. Light pours through the bronze latticework of the museum's outer shell, casting warm geometric patterns across the floor. It feels almost spiritual, as though sunlight itself is dancing with the rhythm of history. This level of the museum is filled with laughter, music, and pride. It's a celebration of what happens when a people, once silenced, find their voice, and that voice echoes across generations. Here, visitors no longer walk through sorrow, they walk through triumph. They see how African American creativity didn't just enrich American culture, it defined it. From the blues that shaped rock and roll, to the poetry that fueled political movements, to the fashion and art that set global trends, everything you see here tells one truth: that culture itself is a form of freedom. As you reach the end of this level, the sounds swell: drums, voices, applause, and laughter merging together like a single heartbeat. It is the sound of joy, of resilience, of survival, turned into song. The journey has not ended, but the rhythm of life and creativity now carries it forward. In this place, the story of African Americans shines not as a story of pain alone, but of power, pride, and creation, the living proof that even in the harshest conditions, the human spirit will always find a way to sing. Beyond the grand achievements and cultural triumphs, the museum opens into a quieter, more intimate space. Here, history breathes, not through headlines or heroes, but through the lives of everyday people. The room feels different: softer light, calm voices, a sense of reflection. Visitors slow their steps, drawn in by small objects with big meanings: a family Bible, its pages worn and notes handwritten in the margins. A child's doll, handmade from scraps of fabric during a time when toys were a rare luxury. A photograph of a wedding day from the early 1900s to young faces glowing with love and hope, dressed in their finest clothes. Each item whispers a story of ordinary existence made extraordinary by endurance. This section honors the countless men and women whose names never appeared in books. The teachers, farmers, seamstresses, inventors, soldiers, and parents who built communities from strength and faith. A display tells of black families during Reconstruction, striving to rebuild lives and open schools, even as the shadows of slavery lingered. Another case shows the rise of black-owned businesses, barbershops, and restaurants, symbols of independence and dignity in a world that often refused to see them as equals. You pass a recreated church interior, filled with gospel hymns that echo softly from hidden speakers. The sound feels alive, the call and response of faith that carried generations through hardship. For many, the church was more than a place of worship. It was a sanctuary, a classroom, a stage, and a political gathering space, the beating heart of black life in America. On a nearby wall, video screens show home movies, families at picnics, children dancing, parents laughing on front porches, moments of normalcy framed by history. You realize that behind every movement and protest were lives like these ordinary people refusing to give up their humanity. One corner honors black educators, from the first freedmen's schools to great universities like Howard, Spelman, and Tuskegee. Books, lesson plans, and photographs tell the story of knowledge as liberation, a quiet revolution fought with chalk and words. Nearby, there's a small display about fashion and self-expression, Sunday hats, sharp suits, and homemade dresses that turn style into pride. To dress well was to claim dignity. To walk tall was to defy invisibility. The exhibit continues through the decades. A World War II uniform belonging to a Tuskegee airman, letters from soldiers writing home, promising to come back to families who waited, prayed, and endured. The story of migration follows suitcases and train tickets, representing millions who left the South for cities in the North and West. Carrying their culture with them, each piece feels deeply personal, but together they tell a collective story, a people shaping a life of meaning despite obstacles. Here, history is not distant or monumental. It is lived, felt, and carried in small acts of courage every day. You see the words engraved on the wall. We are the sum of all those who came before us. It's a reminder that progress is not only born of leaders, but of countless unseen hands that held families together, built communities, and dreamed of a better tomorrow. The atmosphere here is tender, reflective, but not sad. It's full of life, a testament to the power of everyday existence, where love, laughter, and perseverance became the foundation for generations that followed. As visitors leave this section, many pause. Some smile softly, others wipe away tears, because in these simple objects, a photograph, a letter, a hymn, they see not just history, but humanity. This is the quiet heart of the museum, a space that tells us the story of African American history is not just one of pain or protest. It's the story of people who lived full, complex, beautiful lives and whose spirit still shapes America today. The next level of the museum feels electric, louder, faster, more immediate. The air buzzes with the sound of news clips, protest, chants, and music. The 20th century unfolds here, a time when America was forced to look into its own soul. You step into a space filled with photographs of marches, rallies, and voices rising together. The year is 1963. A crowd stretches from the Lincoln Memorial to the horizon, a sea of faces, hands, and dreams. From the speaker's podium, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivers his timeless words, "I have a dream." His voice fills the room, echoing through decades. Nearby, glass cases hold relics of courage, a pair of worn shoes from the Selma to Montgomery March, stained with mud and resolve, a typewriter used by civil rights journalists who risked everything to report the truth, buttons reading "Freedom Now, We Shall Overcome, Black Power." Walls of photographs capture moments, both triumphant and tragic. The Montgomery bus boycott, the Greensboro sit-ins, the March on Washington, and the burning of cities that cried out for justice. Each image tells a story of resistance, a people demanding to be seen, heard, and free. The path continues into the 1970s and 1980s. A video screen plays the rhythms of funk, soul, and hip-hop, new sounds for a new generation. The beat changes, but the message remains the same: freedom, identity, and pride. You see the rise of leaders, artists, and thinkers who redefined what it meant to be black in America. Angela Davis, with her iconic voice and unwavering stance. Malcolm X, with words sharp as truth itself. Muhammad Ali, who refused to fight a war he didn't believe in. Each one challenged not only injustice, but the very definition of America. There's a section dedicated to the Black Panther Party, filled with powerful imagery, community programs, free breakfast initiatives, and the message that empowerment begins at home. This part of the exhibit doesn't shy away from controversy. It confronts the tension between power and protest. between progress and pushback. In one corner, a small display features cassette tapes, boomboxes, and graffiti art, artifacts of the birth of hip-hop. The lyrics of early artists play through speakers, voices from the Bronx turning struggle into poetry, frustration into rhythm. Through rap and street art, a new language emerged, one that spoke truth to power and connected youth across the world. A screen nearby shows the Rodney King protests, the chants of Black Lives Matter, and footage from recent years, marches, speeches, fists raised high. The energy feels both familiar and urgent. You realize that the story is not finished, it's still unfolding. Quotes fill the walls. Illuminated in soft white light, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King Jr., I am America. I am the part you won't recognize. Muhammad Ali, my people, we are beautiful. Tupac Shakur, the sounds around you blend together, church choirs, street rallies, spoken word poetry, and the steady beat of drums. It's not chaos, it's life, it's movement. It's a heartbeat of a nation still learning to listen. Toward the end of the gallery, you see a digital wall filled with names, activists, artists, writers, athletes, and everyday citizens who continue to fight for equality. Visitors can add new names, a reminder that history is not static. It grows with each act of courage. The final images of this floor show unity, crowds holding signs, candles in hand, young people marching, elders watching proudly. The light shining through the bronze lattice feels almost symbolic, as if hope itself is breaking through. As you walk toward the exit of this level, a final message appears on the wall. The struggle continues, and so does the dream. The music fades, replaced by the quiet hum of reflection. You realize that this part of the museum doesn't offer closure. It offers a challenge, a reminder that progress is fragile, that freedom requires constant care, and that the story of equality is still being written every single day. After walking through centuries of struggle, resilience, and triumph, the sound fades, the lights dim, the world grows still. You descend a gentle ramp, and a new atmosphere surrounds you, calm, sacred, almost timeless. The contemplative court awaits. At its center stands a circular pool of water, glowing softly under golden light. From above, a single stream falls endlessly into the pool below, a shimmering ribbon of water that seems to carry every emotion you've felt along the journey. Its rhythm is steady, like a heartbeat, constant, eternal. The air is cool and hushed. Visitors speak in whispers, or not at all. Some sit quietly along the curved stone benches. Others stand motionless, gazing at the water. Lost in thought, the walls are bronze, dark and reflective, their surface catching the ripples of the falling water. Soft light shimmers across them, as though history itself is being illuminated drop by drop. On the wall, engraved words appear, and still we rise. This space is more than an exhibit. It's a sanctuary, a place to breathe after the weight of centuries, to remember the pain, and to honor the strength that carried a people through. Here, visitors are invited to reflect on all they've seen. The chains of slavery, the songs of freedom, the marches, the laughter, the creativity, the courage. It's all here, distilled into silence, light, and water. Some people close their eyes and pray. Others weep softly, touched by the realization of what this story truly means, not just for African Americans, but for all who believe in the human spirit's ability to rise. The sound of the falling water becomes a kind of music, simple, endless, cleansing. It feels like the voice of the ancestors, whispering through time. Remember us. Carry us forward. Live with purpose. It's a place of both grief and peace. A space that doesn't ask you to forget the pain, but to transform it into strength. Light filters down through the bronze oculus above, shimmering like dawn breaking again. The museum's journey, which began in darkness below ground, has now returned to the light. It's symbolic, a passage from sorrow to strength, from oppression to freedom, from silence to song. As you stand there, the museum seems to speak one final message. That history is not just about what happened, it's about what we choose to remember. And in remembering, we find meaning. The water continues to fall, steady and eternal. And in that sound, you hear everything: loss, love, hope, and the quiet promise that tomorrow will be brighter. As you rise from the quiet of the contemplative court, the light grows brighter. You step back into the museum's upper levels, where sunlight filters through the bronze lattice, golden, warm, and alive. It feels as though the entire building is breathing again. Outside, the view opens to the National Mall, the Washington Monument standing tall, the Lincoln Memorial glimmering in the distance. Between these symbols of the nation, the museum stands proudly, not as a monument to the past, but as a living story of America itself. The journey through the museum has been one of descent, an ascent, from darkness to light, from silence to song, from chains to freedom. And that design is deliberate, because the story of African American history is not a straight line. It is a spiral, ever rising, ever returning, always moving forward. This final space celebrates the future, the continuing legacy of a people whose creativity, intellect, and determination have shaped every part of the modern world. Screens and displays show faces of contemporary leaders, artists, and innovators, voices of a new generation continuing the work of those who came before. You see Barack Obama, the first African-American president, standing before a cheering crowd on the steps of the Capitol, the same steps once built by enslaved hands. Nearby, images of poets, filmmakers, scientists, activists, and entrepreneurs tell stories of innovation, pride, and progress. There's a wall filled with digital portraits, visitors' own faces reflected back in real time. It's a reminder that we are part of the story now, that history isn't something we only visit, it's something we live. Every day. The air here is filled with music once more, gospel harmonies blending into modern beats. Old voices meeting new ones. It's the sound of connection across generations. Words appear on the walls around you, lines from writers and leaders whose wisdom still guides the present. History has shown us that courage can be contagious. Michelle Obama. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Maya Angelou. We are the dream and the hope of the slave. From Still I Rise, by Maya Angelou. Standing in this light, you realize the museum is more than a collection of artifacts. It's a mirror reflecting the story of a nation that continues to grow through struggle, beauty, and change. Each visitor leaves carrying something different, a memory, a lesson, a renewed sense of empathy, a promise to do better. Outside, the museum's bronze lattice glows under the sun. Its pattern, inspired by the ironwork crafted by enslaved artisans in the South, now stands as a crown of honor. It reminds the world that what was once forged in bondage has become a symbol of brilliance, artistry, and endurance. As the day ends, sunlight slowly fades over Washington, D.C. The city's monuments cast long shadows across the reflecting pool, while the museum shines like a lantern, a light of remembrance and hope. And somewhere inside, the sound of that falling water still echoes softly. The voices of the past whisper through the halls, carried by those who will tell their stories tomorrow, because the story of African American history is not over. It is alive in music, in art, in community, in every act of courage that continues the dream. And as the museum reminds us, through centuries of struggle, triumph, and rebirth, the legacy does not end here, it lives on, in memory, in spirit, in us all.